"He's just an actor, don't expect him to hit anything but a line." The coach sneered into the mic as 20,000 people laughed. But when Keanu Reeves stood up without a word, glove in hand, and walked toward the field, the laughter faded. What happened next would leave the entire stadium speechless. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The sun had barely risen when the phone rang. Keanu Reeves stood barefoot in the quiet kitchen of his modest Los Angeles home, the steam from his morning tea curling like a ribbon toward the ceiling. Outside, the world was still and golden. He reached for the phone, unsure who would be calling this early. It was a familiar voice on the other end. Mark Ellis, an old friend, and now a coordinator for a large youth sports charity. Mark didn't waste time with small talk. "Keanu, I know you don't do a lot of public appearances, but we've got something special coming up." Keanu listened, his hand wrapped around the warm mug. "There's going to be a charity baseball game," Mark continued. "Two of LA's top teams are playing. A bunch of public figures are attending. But we're still missing that spark. Someone the kids look up to. Someone who shows up not for fame, but for heart." Keanu smiled faintly. He already knew where this was going. Mark went on. "The event's raising money to build new sports fields in underfunded neighborhoods. Kids who can't afford equipment, uniforms, even shoes. This will give them a place to play, a place to dream." There was a pause. "We were hoping you'd come as our guest of honor. Not to play, just to be there. Show the kids someone they believe in. Hasn't forgotten them." Keanu was quiet for a moment. Not because he needed time to think, but because the weight of what Mark was saying meant something deeper than just showing up. He thought of his own childhood. The cracked concrete in Toronto. The second-hand glove he used for 3 summers straight. The feeling of running bases not to win, but to feel free. "I'll be there," he said simply. Mark exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. "You have no idea what that means to them." Another pause. Then Mark added with a chuckle, "And to me." Keanu ended the call, placed the phone gently on the counter, and stood in silence for a moment. He didn't need a press crew. He didn't want an announcement. But something about this felt right. The sound of the back door creaking open broke the stillness. Emma stepped in with a paper bag of groceries in one hand and her laptop bag slung over the other shoulder. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she looked half awake. "You're up early," she said, noticing the calm expression on her uncle's face. "I got a call," Keanu said, pouring her a cup of tea. "From?" He handed her the cup. "Charity baseball event. They want me to show up." Emma raised her eyebrows. "Show up? Like walk the field and wave? Or show up and actually play?" Keanu gave a soft laugh. "They said just be there." I said yes. Emma sat down slowly at the table, curiosity blooming across her face. "Uncle K, you know the kids are gonna lose it when they see you. This could go viral in like 10 seconds. Keanu only nodded, his thoughts already elsewhere. Emma leaned forward, wrapping both hands around the mug of tea. She watched her uncle carefully. His expression was calm, as always, but she could tell something deeper was moving behind his eyes. "So," she asked softly, "are you gonna just sit in the stands? Or are you thinking about stepping on the field?" Keanu looked up at her and tilted his head slightly. "I'm not a ball player, Emma." Emma smiled. "You were, once." He let out a slow breath. "That was a long time ago, on a very different field." She nodded, then added gently, "But I've seen you throw. You still got it." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked over to the hall closet and opened the door. Inside, on the top shelf, was an old canvas bag. He reached for it and brought it down. Emma watched silently as he unzipped it. Inside was a weathered baseball glove darkened by age, the leather worn but still strong. He ran his fingers across the stitching. "It was a gift," he said quietly. "Coach Rourke. He gave it to me after our last game together." Emma smiled, remembering the story he'd told her years ago. Coach Rourke wasn't just a coach. He was one of the few adults in young Keanu's life who had seen him, really seen him. The quiet boy, with questions in his eyes and something gentle in his spirit. "He told me I didn't have to be the best," Keanu said. "I just had to love the game." Emma's voice softened. "I think that's what people forget, especially the loud ones." Keanu smiled at that. He carefully closed the bag and set it on the table. "I'm not doing this for publicity, Em. I'm going because I believe in what they're building. Sports kept me grounded when I could have drifted." Emma's expression grew serious. "I know, but there's something else." She pulled her laptop from her bag and flipped it open. "They're already promoting the event. Here's the poster." She turned the screen toward him. Keanu's name was already on the banner, bold and centered. "Special guest, Keanu Reeves, supporting our youth through sports." He looked at it for a long moment, then leaned back. "I didn't expect them to lead with my name." Emma shrugged. "They know what your face means to people." Keanu didn't answer right away. He just nodded, as if accepting something quietly. Then he said, "If just being there makes them feel seen, then I'll sit through the noise." Emma smiled and stood. "You're more than a face to them, Uncle K. You're hope that doesn't shout." He looked at her. "Then let's hope it matters." She walked out to start her day. Keanu sat alone, the old glove on the table beside him, the morning sun slanting across the floor. Later that afternoon, Keanu sat on the back porch with the canvas bag by his side. The city buzzed in the distance, but here it was quiet. Just the gentle hum of wind brushing through the trees, and the soft creak of the old wood beneath his feet. He pulled the glove from the bag again and turned it over in his hands. Every scar, every faded stitch told a story. He remembered afternoons in the sun, chasing fly balls until the streetlights came on. He remembered the sting of a line drive caught bare-handed, the smell of dust and grass, the way the world slowed down when he stood at home plate. It had been years, decades even. But holding the glove still stirred something in him. Not nostalgia, not pride, something simpler, peace, the kind that only comes from doing something for the love of it. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from the event organizers. "Looking forward to seeing you next Saturday, Mr. Reeves. The kids are already asking about you. Let us know if you want to say a few words during the game." Keanu replied simply, "I'll be there." No promises, no expectations. He wasn't going to put on a show. He was just going to show up. Inside the house, Emma had left a small note on the fridge before heading out. In her familiar handwriting, it read, "You don't need a bat to make an impact, but maybe bring one anyway, just in case." Keanu smiled at the note, then went to the hall closet again. He reached into the very back and pulled out something wrapped in an old towel. He unwrapped it slowly. A wooden bat, aged and darkened over time, the handle still taped where it had cracked once during a pickup game in Vancouver. He ran his thumb over the grain. No logos, no brand, just a memory waiting to be remembered. He carefully placed it beside the glove, inside the canvas bag, then zipped it closed. This wasn't about proving anything. Not to the kids, not to the crowd, not even to the ones who would laugh. This was about being present for those who needed to see someone walk quietly through noise and still stand tall. He stood at the window for a while, watching the sun slip behind the trees. The light was soft, almost golden, the kind of light that makes even the worn-out things look sacred. He picked up the bag, held it for a moment, then set it gently by the front door. A small gesture, but it marked the beginning. The sun rose high above Dodger Stadium, casting long, clean shadows across the emerald green field. It was one of those picture-perfect California mornings, blue skies, a gentle breeze, and the hum of excitement already filling the air before the first pitch. By noon, the stands were alive. More than 20,000 people streamed through the gates, some dressed in full baseball gear, others in bright t-shirts, sunglasses, and baseball caps turned backward. Families carried signs that read things like, "Team B forever," "Swing big or go home," and "We love baseball." A few creative kids held up handmade posters with drawings of cartoon bats and baseballs, shouting their team chants before they even found their seats. Vendors walked the aisles calling out offers for popcorn, soda, and hot dogs. A DJ spun upbeat tracks from a booth near third base, mixing old-school hip-hop with classic stadium anthems. Balloons floated above the dugouts, and a giant inflatable baseball glove bounced slowly in the outfield corner, surrounded by laughing children. It wasn't just a game, it was a celebration. This was the biggest charity match of the year, hosted by two of Los Angeles' top minor league teams. All proceeds from ticket sales, merchandise, and special appearances would go to building and maintaining athletic programs for children in low-income neighborhoods. The atmosphere had the buzz of something special, something more than just baseball. Celebrities dotted the sidelines, exchanging smiles and handshakes for photos. A former late-night host gave a quick interview. A beloved sitcom actor threw a few balls into the crowd and danced a little as the crowd cheered. And then there was Keanu. He arrived quietly. No grand entrance, no entourage. Just a simple dark gray t-shirt, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low. Sunglasses shielded his eyes, but nothing could hide that unmistakable face. As he made his way down to the front row near the third base line, the crowd noticed. First one camera phone went up, then 20. By the time he reached his seat, fans were whispering, pointing, and nudging each other. That's him. That's really him. He sat down slowly, folding his hands in his lap, the canvas bag resting by his feet. Beside him, Emma scanned the crowd with wide eyes, visibly tense. "Uncle," she whispered, "they're going to keep staring." He didn't answer at first. His gaze drifted across the field, watching the players warm up. The sharp pop of balls landing in gloves echoed across the stadium. Coaches paced, kids in jerseys chased foul balls and squealed with joy. Keanu smiled softly. "It's their field," he said. "Let them play." Emma leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "They're not just looking, Uncle. They're recording. You're already on like 20 Instagram stories." Keanu turned slightly, glanced up at the jumbotron just as his face filled the screen. The camera operator didn't even try to be subtle. The entire crowd saw him projected high above center field, his calm expression framed by the text, "Special guest, Keanu Reeves." A ripple of cheers ran through the audience. People started clapping. Someone shouted from the upper rows, "We love you, Keanu," followed by a few more scattered voices. Joining in, he offered a small wave, just enough to acknowledge them, then turned his attention back to the field. A foul ball soared toward the third base line and bounced off the netting just a few feet away from where Saturday Emma gave him a look. "You're not going to be able to blend in." Keanu chuckled softly. "I'm not here to blend in. I'm here to support." One of the ushers approached with a clipboard and an earpiece. She bent slightly, eyes kind, but clearly nervous. "Mr. Reeves, the organizers wanted to know if you'd be willing to join the announcers for a quick pre-game wave. You don't need to speak, just a walk across the field, a moment of recognition." Emma looked at him with concern, unsure what he'd say. Keanu nodded once, gently. "If it's for the kids, I'll walk." The usher looked relieved and quickly radioed back confirmation. 5 minutes later, the stadium speakers boomed as the MC's voice echoed across the seats. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're honored today to welcome a man who's not only a Hollywood legend, but a champion for community and compassion, Mr. Keanu Reeves." The applause came fast and loud. Keanu stood up, a bit reluctant, but centered, and walked slowly along the third base line. His stride was modest, no showmanship, no waving hands, just steady presence. Children leaned over the railings, trying to high-five him. He offered small nods, the occasional handshake. People were filming, calling his name, but he didn't seem distracted. He was focused on the field, on the players warming up, on the reason he was here. He stopped briefly at the first base coach's box, placing a hand on the shoulder of a young player, maybe 12 years old, who stood there as part of the opening ceremony lineup. Keanu smiled at him. "Play with heart," he said. The boy's face lit up as if someone had just handed him a trophy. Emma watched the whole thing from her seat, her throat tight. She'd seen her uncle in interviews, on red carpets, in movies viewed by millions. But nothing had ever felt as powerful as this moment. Just a man walking a baseball field, silent and grounded, reminding people what respect looks like when it doesn't need a microphone. As Keanu returned to his seat, the stadium settled back into its rhythm. The announcer introduced the lineups for both teams, cheers rising as players jogged out from the dugouts. A marching band played a few bars of a classic baseball anthem, their brass glinting under the afternoon sundae. The atmosphere was electric now, buzzing with energy, warmed by community, but still pulsing with the undertone of curiosity. Everyone had seen Keanu walk the field. Everyone had recorded it. And now, everyone was asking the same thing. Was he just here to watch, or was he going to play? The speculation spread fast. Fans in nearby rows whispered and scrolled through Twitter. Posts popped up every few seconds. Keanu just walked the field at Dodger Stadium. He's totally gonna swing, right? Imagine if he hits a home run. That would break the internet. I dare the pitcher to throw him one. Emma leaned toward him again. You're trending already. Keanu gave her a look of amused disbelief. I didn't do anything. She shook her head with a smirk. You walked. That's apparently enough. He smiled faintly and turned back to the game. The first pitch cracked across the plate. The crowd roared. A batter sprinted for first. Dust flew, gloves clapped, players shouted signals across the diamond. The game had officially begun, but the eyes, they kept drifting. Every time the big screen cut to Keanu, the reaction was instant. Applause. Phone screens raised, and the question grew louder. Why was he really here? He sat calmly, hands resting on his knees, occasionally clapping for a good play. No posturing. No signs of expectation. Still, the weight of attention hung in the air, like a storm cloud not ready to rain. Midway through the second inning, the crowd started a quiet chant near section 112. It began with a few teenage voices, but spread like wildfire. Let him play. Clap, 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 clap. Let him play. Emma froze. She looked at Keanu. His eyes remained on the field, but something flickered behind them. He didn't respond. Not yet. The chant died down after a while, fading back into the rhythm of the game. A home run from Team B reignited cheers and dancing in the stands. The announcers cracked jokes, and the wave rolled around the stadium twice. But the silence from Keanu? That stayed loud. Emma looked around, and then whispered, not quite teasing, but not completely serious either. If you go out there, don't hold back. He turned toward her, thoughtful. I'm not here to prove anything. She studied his expression and nodded slowly. But if they ask, he paused. Then I'll answer, just not with words. He looked back at the field, the sunlight catching his profile, the canvas bag still sitting quietly at his feet. And though no one knew it yet, everything was already shifting. By the middle of the fourth inning, the stadium was alive with energy. Team B had taken a narrow lead, and the crowd was split evenly between cheering, laughing, and simply soaking in the joy of the afternoon. Keanu remained seated near the third base line, his posture relaxed, his presence steady. Emma sat beside him, her eyes flicking occasionally to her phone. The chant from earlier had faded, but the buzz hadn't. People were still whispering, still pointing, still hoping. Then, the momentum shifted. During a brief timeout for a pitching change, Coach Daniels of Team A stepped out of the dugout with his usual swagger. Known for his brash personality and love of theatrics, he spotted an opportunity and he took it. He walked toward the announcer's mic near the dugout, leaned in like it was part of the show, and spoke with a grin that stretched a little too wide. Well now folks, since we've got Mr. Hollywood gracing us with his presence today, the crowd chuckled, unsure of where this was going. Daniels continued, his voice echoing across the stadium. Maybe if we're lucky, he'll treat us to one of those slow-motion replays. You know, the kind where everything explodes, and the hero hits the bad guy with a bat made of CGI. Laughter erupted. The timing was perfect. The camera operator instinctively cut to Keanu's face on the jumbotron. The entire stadium turned their gaze. Phones shot up instantly. A sea of glowing screens captured the moment. Emma's jaw tightened. Her body tensed beside Keanu. Is he serious? She muttered. The laughter got louder. Coach Daniels raised a hand like a comedian basking in applause. "He's a good guy, I'm sure. But come on, this is a baseball field, not a movie set." More laughter. The comment hit differently this time. It wasn't just a joke, it was meant to sting. Keanu didn't move. He didn't blink. His expression remained calm, almost unreadable. But if you looked close, just close enough, there was a subtle change. A shift in his jaw, a soft flicker in his eyes, something quiet, but not passive. Emma leaned closer, her voice low and sharp. "You don't deserve this." He glanced at her, then back at the field. His tone was soft, steady. "I'm not here for me." Emma opened her mouth to say something more, but stopped, because in that moment, Keanu's silence said more than any retort ever could. And yet, the stadium kept laughing. Coach Daniels tipped his cap sarcastically in Keanu's direction, then turned back to his dugout with a grin. A few of his players chuckled nervously, not sure if they should be laughing or cringing. One of them, a tall first baseman, shot a glance toward Keanu that lingered just a second too long. He didn't laugh, he just watched. The crowd slowly returned its attention to the game, but the air had shifted. A few fans were still chuckling, replaying the coach's joke on their phones. Others looked uncomfortable, realizing the jab might have gone too far. The energy that once felt playful now hovered on the edge of cruelty. Keanu sat unchanged. No slouched shoulders, no clenched fists, just quiet. But Emma could feel the tension in her own chest rising. "Why do they always do this?" she whispered. "You show up, you give your time, your name helps raise thousands of dollars, and they still..." He turned slightly toward her and gave a small shake of his head. "Let it pass." She stared at him, eyes sharp. "Why do you always let people take shots at you like that?" Keanu's voice was so calm it almost didn't match the roar of the crowd. "Because it's not about me." Emma blinked. "You say that like it's supposed to make it okay." He looked toward the kids, sitting on the lower bleachers, their legs swinging under their chairs, eyes bright with joy. "For some of them," he said, "this is their first game. They're not here to watch a fight. They're here to feel like the world is still good." Emma followed his gaze. A little boy, no older than 7, was waving a flag half his size and laughing as it smacked his older sister in the face by accident. She laughed too. Keanu added, "What matters is what they remember." The announcer returned to the mic, trying to pull the mood back toward fun. "And we are back to baseball, folks. Remember, this is all for the kids, so keep those cheers loud and your hearts open." But the moment lingered. The camera cut back to the field, and the game resumed. A line drive sent the crowd into cheers, and the scoreboard ticked upward. Still, a few eyes kept drifting back to Keanu. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't reacting. He was waiting. Coach Daniels, now leaning against the dugout railing, smirked as he spoke to one of his assistants. "Bet he never even swung a real bat in his life." Another assistant chuckled under his breath. "I mean, he's what, 60? Daniels shook his head, the grin never leaving his face. Hollywood types always think they can walk into the real world and own it. It doesn't work that way. Just then, a foul ball shot toward the third base line. Without thinking, Keanu stood, stepped 1 foot over the railing, and reached up with one hand. The glove his old one snagged the ball clean out of the air. The crowd gasped, then erupted into applause. He stepped back over the rail, handed the ball to the nearest child, then sat down again. No expression, no pride, just presence. Emma smiled through tight lips. Well, that shut a few mouths. Keanu sipped from his cup and nodded once. Let them laugh. The child who caught the ball from Keanu stared at it like it was made of gold. His father leaned over, whispering something in his ear. The boy turned to look at Keanu and gave him a small salute. Keanu returned it with a gentle nod. Around them, something shifted. Not all at once, not loudly, but in small, quiet ways. A few people who had laughed now sat still. Others leaned to their friends and whispered things like, "Okay, that was actually cool," or "He caught that with one hand." And in the dugout of Team A, the smirk on Coach Daniels' face faded just a little. Still, he couldn't resist one last jab. During the next timeout, he raised his voice and turned toward the front rows, where Keanu Saturday. "Hey Reeves," he called out, loud enough for the mic to pick up. "You ever hit a real fastball? Or just the ones they choreograph in front of green screens?" The stadium chuckled again, less enthusiastically this time. Emma stood up halfway, her jaw clenched, but Keanu gently reached out and touched her wrist. "Number." His voice was calm. "They'll see soon enough." Emma sat back down slowly, her eyes never leaving Daniels. Keanu's eyes returned to the field. The players were shifting positions. The crowd was settling again. But something had fractured. It wasn't just about a celebrity anymore. It had become a test. A test of grace. A test of patience. A test of how far someone can be pushed before they break. But Keanu didn't look like he was breaking. He looked like he was waiting. The Jumbotron cut to a replay of his foul ball catch. The crowd cheered again. Not wildly, but with growing admiration. The announcers added commentary to fill the air. "Well, that was a clean grab. Seems like Mr. Reeves might have a little game in him after all." The co-host laughed. "Hey, don't tempt fate. If he actually steps onto that field, we may all eat our words." Back in the stands, Emma leaned close once more. "They're daring you. You know that, right?" Keanu didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on the pitcher's mound. "They're not daring me," he said softly. "They're daring something they don't understand." Emma studied him, then followed his gaze. Out on the field, the game continued, but the undercurrent had changed. It was no longer just a charity event. It was becoming a moment. Something was building. The coach had tried to humiliate him. The crowd had laughed, but Keanu hadn't flinched. And now people were beginning to wonder, not if he could play, but what would happen if he did. The next inning started, but Emma wasn't watching the field. She was watching him. Keanu hadn't flinched since Coach Daniels' last comment. His expression remained calm, but Emma could see it the small signs, the quiet stillness that meant something inside him was turning. She leaned closer, voice low. "You don't have to stay." He didn't respond at first. He sipped slowly from the paper cup of tea he'd brought with him, the steam rising gently in the warm air. "I mean it," she said. "We can leave. Now. They've already had their fun." He looked at her then, eyes steady. "It's not about fun," he said. Emma glanced around. People were still looking, still murmuring. Some smiled with genuine admiration. Others still had that smirk, the kind that thinks it knows better. "They're not going to stop," she whispered. "You know that, right?" He nodded slowly, gaze returning to the diamond. "They might not. So why stay?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he shifted slightly in his seat and looked out across the stadium, not at the players, not at the cameras, but at the crowd, specifically at the kids. Rows and rows of them, some in school jerseys, some in team hats, too big for their heads. One little girl near the front had a glove on both hands and was swinging them wildly through the air like she didn't care what she caught. A boy in a wheelchair had a foam finger pointed straight at the sky, waving it with a grin that never faded. Keanu nodded gently toward them. "Because they're watching." Emma followed his gaze, her shoulders softening slightly. He took another sip of tea. "My coach used to say something," he said quietly. "He'd tell us, noise only matters if you listen to it." Emma tilted her head. "Yeah? And what did you do with that advice?" He smiled faintly. "I stopped listening to the noise and started listening to the silence instead." She exhaled through her nose. "You and your Zen master wisdom." Keanu chuckled, eyes still on the field. Emma leaned back against her seat, still visibly tense. But what if this gets worse? What if Daniels pulls something again? Keanu didn't blink. Then he does. Emma looked at him carefully. "You're really not going to say anything back to him?" He finally turned toward her, just slightly. "Sometimes silence is the answer." She held his gaze. But not always, right? A pause. Then Keanu nodded once. Deliberate. Sometimes, actions speak the truth. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. In that moment, the scoreboard buzzed with a foul call. The players shifted again. But from the stands, the camera operator once again panned to Keanu's section. And this time, as his face filled the jumbotron, there was no laughter, just stillness. The kids didn't look away. They were watching. The game continued, inning by inning, play by play, but Keanu remained unmoved. He watched everything with quiet intensity, as though he were studying more than just the ball. He was watching body language, reactions, moments between moments. Emma shifted beside him again, crossing her arms. She couldn't relax. Not yet. "You really think just sitting here is going to be enough?" she asked. Keanu didn't turn his head. "I'm not here to prove anything." Emma gave a half laugh under her breath. Could have fooled everyone in this stadium. He looked at her, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "That's the problem. Everyone thinks it has to be a show." Emma sighed and leaned forward, elbows on her knees. Her tone softened. "Then what is it, Uncle?" Keanu paused. "It's presence." Emma waited. "Being here, without needing to take over, without needing to push. Just being. It matters." She nodded slowly, though she still didn't look fully convinced. In front of them, the kids were starting to chant again. Not for a team, not for a score, but for a name. "Keanu! Keanu! Keanu!" It wasn't mocking this time. It was real. The chant didn't rise like a wave. It rippled gently, like something honest, like something earned. A boy holding a plastic baseball stood on his seat and shouted, "Let him hit!" Emma turned to her uncle again. "That presence you're talking about? It's starting to speak for itself." Keanu watched the boy, then the dozens of kids around him. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached slowly into his canvas bag. He didn't pull anything out. He just rested his hand inside it, touching the glove. And for a moment, he closed his eyes. Flash. The world around him faded, replaced by the distant memory of chalk lines on cracked pavement. A wooden bat too long for his arms. A neighborhood park tucked between two rows of brick buildings. His childhood coach, Mr. Rourke, crouched beside him after a game long lost, had said something he'd never forgotten. "It's not about the scoreboard, kid. It's about who you are when the bat's in your hand. Don't play to impress. Play because it matters to you." Another flash. The same words, years later, whispered to his younger self as he stood at the edge of a film set in his early career, nervous, uncertain, wondering if he belonged. That voice had followed him everywhere. And now, it echoed once more. "Don't play to impress. Play because it matters." He opened his eyes again. Emma watched him quietly. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Because in the space between what had been said and what had been felt, something had already begun to shift. Not with a speech, not with a scene, but with silence. And the stadium, for all its noise, had started to feel it. 2. Another pitch flew across the plate. A clean strike. The crowd clapped politely, but their focus kept drifting. Even the commentators began to acknowledge it. Every time the camera cuts to Keanu Reeves, the noise in this stadium just changes. The co-host added, "I've covered a lot of games, but I've never seen a celebrity sit this still, this long, and somehow become the center of it all." On the sidelines, Coach Daniels paced behind the dugout, pretending not to look in Keanu's direction, but he noticed the shift. He noticed the crowd's eyes weren't just watching the game anymore. They were watching him, watching how he reacted, watching whether he'd poke the bear again. But Keanu gave him nothing, just stillness, just presence. Emma leaned over again, more gently this time. "You know, when I was little, I thought silence meant weakness. Like, if you didn't fight back, people won." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "And now?" She took a breath. "Now I think, maybe silence is just the space between who you are and what they think you are." He turned his eyes back to the children in the stands. One girl had taken off her hat and was holding it over her heart, staring at him like he was something mythical, not famous, something else, something sacred. Keanu smiled gently. I'm not here to change their minds. I'm here to show them it's okay to be different. Emma looked away quickly, blinking hard. You're gonna make me cry in public. He laughed softly. Another foul ball landed near the edge of the third base line. The stadium jumped, but Keanu didn't move this time. He just sat there, unmoving, unbothered, and unafraid. That was what the kids were seeing. That was what the parents were starting to understand. The kind of strength that doesn't need to shout. The kind of dignity that doesn't rise just to be seen. Quiet leadership. Real humility. One of the camera operators, clearly moved by the moment, kept cutting back to Keanu. Not for sensationalism, but because something about the silence felt cinematic. And in homes across the country, where families watched the charity event live stream, where young boys and girls sat on living room rugs eating lunch and dreaming of playing someday, something happened. They leaned forward. They whispered his name. And not because he was a movie star, but because he was teaching them something. Without a lecture, without a stage, just by being still when others threw stones. Emma reached into her bag and pulled out a bottle of water, handing it to him. He took it with a nod. You're not going to sit here forever, she said. He glanced down at the glove again. No, he replied softly. Only long enough. Long enough for what? He looked up, eyes steady. For them to believe in something better. The fifth inning moved with tension in the air. Not because of the score, it was still close, but because something was shifting in the atmosphere. People weren't watching just for the game anymore. They were waiting for something more. The crowd leaned in slightly with every pause. The stadium lights brightened, even though the sun hadn't yet set, casting a soft glow across the field. The energy felt like a held breath. Then the loudspeakers crackled. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer boomed, as part of today's charity celebration, we're introducing a special celebrity moment right after this inning. One lucky guest from our VIP section will get the chance to step onto the field. The crowd erupted with cheers. The kids screamed. Fans clapped and whistled. Everyone was hoping for something fun, maybe even chaotic. A moment to laugh, to film, to post. Coach Daniels of Team A heard it from his dugout and grinned. He leaned toward the announcer's platform and signaled with 2 fingers. You want a show? He said into the mic, his voice thick with amusement. Put Reeves in. A pause, then a wave of laughter. A few claps. The stadium camera zoomed in on Keanu again, seated quietly, hands still folded, eyes calm. Daniels grinned wider. He's been sitting all day like a wax statue. Let's give the fans something to remember. More laughter. The announcer hesitated. Then, not wanting to break the crowd's energy, he went along with it. Well, folks, looks like we've got a special request. Keanu Reeves, would you be willing to take the field for a few swings? A roar of applause, half mocking, half hopeful. Keanu didn't move right away. Emma turned to him, eyes wide. You don't have to do this. He looked at her, not defensive, not offended, just steady. I know. She reached out, her voice barely above a whisper. They're trying to humiliate you. His eyes didn't leave hers. I'm not doing it for them. He stood slowly, the glove in one hand, the old wooden bat in the other. As he stepped into the aisle, the crowd surged again. The cheers were louder now, mixed with curiosity, excitement, and the edge of disbelief. The camera followed his every step as he walked toward the dugout tunnel. Emma stood, heart racing, watching him disappear into the shadowed archway. She whispered to herself, more than to him, please let them see who you really are. The Jumbotron held on the empty tunnel for a moment. The field went quiet. Then the announcer's voice returned, a little more serious now. Keanu Reeves has agreed to take the field, folks. Let's give him some support. A soft applause followed, some genuine, some sarcastic. And somewhere in between, a quiet anticipation began to bloom, because nobody really knew what would happen next. And that made it impossible to look away. Inside the tunnel, the sound of the stadium dimmed to a low thrum. Keanu walked slowly, each footstep echoing softly off the concrete walls. The cool air inside the corridor was a contrast to the heat of the day. For a moment, the world felt paused, as if it were holding space just for him. He reached the small equipment area where a few staff members were waiting. One of them, a young man in his early 20s, looked nervous as he handed over a Team B practice jersey. "You don't have to wear this," he said. "It's just for pictures." Keanu took it in his hands, then glanced down at what he was already wearing: his simple gray t-shirt, faded jeans, and worn sneakers. No sponsor logos, no fanfare. He folded the jersey neatly and handed it back. "I think I'll go as I am." The staffer nodded, eyes wide, with something close to awe. A few yards away, the assistant coach of Team B was pacing. Coach Valdez was known as a quiet man, the opposite of Daniels in every way. He had been hesitant about the idea of putting Keanu on the field, but now, seeing the seriousness in his eyes, he stepped forward. "You ever been in a batter's box before?" Keanu nodded once. "Long time ago." Valdez gave a short nod in return. Not approval, not skepticism, just acknowledgement. "You're not here to prove anything," he said. Keanu met his eyes. "Number, I'm here to remind someone." Valdez didn't ask what he meant. He just motioned toward the bat rack. "You can use one of ours, but it looks like you brought your own." Keanu lifted the bat from the canvas bag. It was aged, but the wood still held its strength. The grip had been retaped, the mark of use still etched into the barrel. Valdez looked at it with respect. "You sure about this?" Keanu rested the bat over his shoulder. "I've never been more sure." Back outside, the crowd waited. The camera panned across the field, then to the dugout, then back to the tunnel again. The announcer's voice softened as he filled the silence. For those just joining us, actor Keanu Reeves is about to step onto the field in what's become one of the most anticipated moments of the afternoon. Children were now standing on their seats. Parents leaned forward. Coach Daniels smirked again from the other dugout, elbowing his assistant. "This'll be fun." And then Keanu appeared, walking slowly from the tunnel into the light. The sunlight caught his silhouette first, then his face, then the bat resting casually across his shoulder. The crowd didn't cheer immediately. There was a hush, as if something sacred had entered the game. Then the noise came, not like before. This time, it was different. This time, it sounded like respect. Keanu walked toward home plate without rushing, without gesturing to the crowd, without trying to be anything other than who he was. No swagger, no show. Just a man in jeans, carrying a memory. Emma stood in the front row, watching every step. Her heart was pounding in a way she hadn't expected. She had seen him walk into studios and film, sets. She had seen him on stage at award shows. But this felt different. This was raw. This was real. The stadium announcer kept his tone light. "Looks like Mr. Reeves is stepping in for a quick charity moment, folks. Let's give him a warm welcome." A polite cheer rose from the crowd. Then, unexpectedly, some of the kids began to chant again. "Keanu, Keanu, Keanu." And this time, it wasn't just the kids. Adults joined in. Not everyone, but enough to make the rest stop laughing. The catcher crouched behind home plate, glancing over his shoulder to get a look at Keanu. He gave him a small nod, like a silent good luck. Keanu returned it. The pitcher, a young backup known for his speed, smiled as he adjusted his cap. "You sure about this?" he called out. Keanu didn't answer. He just stepped into the batter's box. No practice swings. No deep breaths. Just quiet. He planted his feet, gripped the bat, lowered his shoulders, and waited. In the opposing dugout, Coach Daniels leaned forward, arms crossed. He whispered, just loud enough for the others to hear, "Let's see if he can even make contact." The pitcher wound up. The crowd held its breath, and just before the ball left the pitcher's hand, Emma whispered under her breath, "You're not doing this for them." The ball flew. Keanu watched it come. He didn't swing. Strike one. The umpire called it clean. The crowd responded with a mix of cheers and a few chuckles. He stepped back from the box, reset his feet, and stepped in again. Still no emotion. Still no panic. Daniels grinned. This is going to be easier than I thought. The second pitch came fast. Keanu swung. He missed. Strike two. Louder laughter this time. But not from everyone. Emma gripped the railing. Her eyes locked on him. He stepped out again, paused, looked down, and then, without a word, he lifted his head and turned toward the pitcher. The crowd quieted. Even Daniels stopped talking. Keanu raised the bat again. The pitcher nodded once and wound up for the third throw. And in that still, silent moment, just before the ball reached him, something shifted in Keanu's stance. Not aggression, not fear. Something else. Balance, purpose. And though no one could hear it, not really, the words from his past echoed in his mind. Play, because it matters. As the pitch flew through the air, time seemed to slow. And then, he swung. As the ball traveled toward him, time stretched. But before the swing connected or missed something inside, Keanu pulled him backward. Not physically, but deeper. Into memory. Into a place where baseball didn't mean stadiums or crowds. It meant something quieter. Something sacred. The wind that brushed his face on the field became the wind of a different season. Toronto. Age 11. The sky over the city was gray that day, but the park in the middle of the block glowed with the rich color of worn dirt and yellowing grass. The old diamond sat crooked at the edge of a playground, where chain-link fences were half bent and chalk lines were drawn by hand. A boy stood alone in center field, glove too big for his hand, cleats a size too small. Young Keanu. He wasn't picked often. He didn't shout loud enough, didn't run fast enough, didn't make himself the center of anything. But he showed up every weekend, even when the other boys didn't pass him the ball, even when his name wasn't on the roster. That afternoon, he was playing catch on the sideline by himself, tossing the ball gently into the air, watching it fall into his glove over and over again. And then a voice called out, "You ever gonna stop throwing it to yourself?" Keanu turned. It was Mr. Rourke, the neighborhood coach, older than most of the kids' parents, with thick white eyebrows, sun-spotted arms, and a baseball cap that had been bleached by more summers than anyone could count. Keanu didn't know what to say. Mr. Rourke walked over, hands in his pockets, and stood next to him. "You know what I see when I watch you?" he asked. Keanu shook his head. Rourke pointed to the other boys on the field, shouting and jostling for positions. They play to win. Then he pointed to Keanu. "You play to feel the game." Keanu blinked. "I'm not that good." Mr. Rourke nodded. "Neither were most of the greats when they started." Keanu looked at the ground. "I never get picked." Rourke took a breath. "You know what this game is really about?" Keanu looked up. "It's not about being the best," Rourke said. "It's about feeling alive in the game. Every swing, every breath, every step." He pointed to Keanu's chest. "If it's in there, that's all you need." Keanu held his glove tighter. "Even if nobody sees it?" Rourke smiled. "Especially then." He patted Keanu on the shoulder. "Come by tomorrow, I'll throw you a few." Keanu nodded slowly. And that night, for the first time in a long while, he placed the glove on his nightstand instead of stuffing it under the bed, because something had changed, not on the field, but inside. The next day, Keanu returned to the park. He came alone, early, before any of the other kids arrived. The morning light was soft, filtering through the trees, like it was in no rush. The dew was still clinging to the grass. The air smelled like wet dirt and last night's rain. Coach Rourke was already there. He stood near home plate with a small bucket of baseballs and an old wooden bat resting against the fence. He waved Keanu over without saying a word. Keanu jogged to the plate, nervous but excited. It was the first time anyone had invited him to do anything on that field. Coach tossed him a glove, one that actually fit. "Let's warm up." For the next 20 minutes, they played catch in silence. Not because there was nothing to say, but because sometimes words just got in the way. Each throw was a rhythm, each catch a small moment of success. Keanu missed a few, dropped a couple, but Coach never flinched, never scolded, never made him feel like he had to be something more than what he was. After the warm-up, Rourke motioned him toward the batter's box. "Let's see that swing." Keanu stepped in, gripping the bat awkwardly. His stance was too wide, his elbows too stiff. But Coach didn't correct him right away. He let him feel it first. The first pitch came soft. Keanu swung and missed. The second was the same. He looked down, ashamed, ready to apologize. But Rourke just walked over and crouched beside him. "You ever danced before?" Keanu looked confused. Number Rourke grinned. "Well, baseball's the same thing. It's not about hitting the ball with force. It's about rhythm, timing, breathing. Let the swing be a part of you." He stepped back and tossed another pitch. Keanu waited half a second longer this time, then swung. A clean connection. The ball cracked and sailed into right field, bouncing once before settling in the grass. Coach didn't cheer, he just smiled. "That," he said, "is what alive feels like." Keanu's eyes lit up. They practiced for an hour. And when it was time to go, Coach handed him the glove he'd used and said, "Keep it, it's yours now. Not because you're ready, but because you showed up." Keanu stared at the glove, then at Coach. "Will you be here tomorrow?" Rourke winked. "Kid, I've been here every day since '74. You just finally noticed." Keanu laughed. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he belonged somewhere. Not because he was the best, but because someone saw him. And because on that crooked diamond, under a sky heavy with clouds, baseball wasn't a game, it was a language. And he was finally learning how to speak it. The memory faded slowly. The dusty field, the sound of Coach Rourke's voice, the rhythm of breath between pitches, and in its place came the sound of the present, the rush of wind, the quiet murmur of the crowd, holding its breath, the weight of the wooden bat resting in Keanu's hands. Back in the batter's box, he blinked once, steadying himself. His grip tightened, not from nerves, but from clarity. The glove sat tucked near the dugout fence, where he'd placed it before stepping out. As he glanced toward it, something warm flickered in his chest. Not pride, not defiance, just memory. He whispered to himself, barely audible, "Let's play for love." Then he exhaled. The crowd didn't hear him, but somehow they felt it. The third pitch was already in motion, cutting through the air like a question waiting for an answer. Keanu's stance shifted. He didn't think, he didn't measure, he just moved. The swing came clean, smooth, quiet, almost too quiet for what came next. Because when the bat met the ball, the sound exploded. A crack so sharp it sliced through the entire stadium. For a second, everything paused. The ball lifted, high and fast, rising toward the sun like it had been set free. The outfielders turned and sprinted, but it was no use. The crowd rose as one, slowly at first, then all at once. The ball soared, and then it vanished over the fence. Gone. Silence. Then a roar that shook the seats. Emma covered her mouth, eyes wide, frozen in place. People jumped, cried out, hugged each other like something holy had just happened. The camera zoomed in on Keanu. He didn't pump his fists. He didn't smile wide. He just began his slow jog around the bases, the bat still resting gently in his hand before he let it drop behind him. First base, second, third. Each step was the same as it had been when he was a boy, awkward, unsure, and full of heart. By the time he reached home plate, the chant had started again. Keanu, Keanu, Keanu. And this time, it wasn't playful. It wasn't ironic. It was reverent. Coach Daniels stood at the edge of his dugout, arms crossed, face slack with disbelief. The assistant beside him whispered, "Did you know he could do that?" Daniels didn't respond. He just stared. Emma finally breathed again. She wiped her eyes, half laughing, half crying. "You did it," she whispered. But Keanu didn't hear her. His eyes were on the glove near the fence, the one Coach Rourke had given him. And in his heart, he wasn't standing on a major league field. He was back in that crooked park in Toronto, 11 years old, hearing that voice again. Play to feel alive. And now he had. The stadium was still roaring from the home run when Keanu handed the bat to the nearest staff member and walked calmly toward the infield. He didn't wear a jersey, no number, no sponsor logo. Just a loose, faded shirt neutral in color, soft with age, and jeans that didn't quite fit the mold of the pro players around him. But somehow, he didn't look out of place. He looked like he belonged in a different way. A deeper way. The murmurs came quickly as he stepped past the dugout. Is he really going to play the field? Was that home run luck? Wait, is he staying in the game? Keanu didn't respond. He didn't even glance at the crowd. Instead, he paused just outside the third base line, turned toward both dugouts, and gave a small bow. Not theatrical, not exaggerated, just respectful. He tipped his cap to the players, then turned toward the stands, specifically the section filled with children, and offered a second bow, his head lowered, hand over his heart. The kids erupted. Even the adults joined in. It wasn't loud, but it was full of something genuine. Appreciation, wonder, surprise. Emma watched it all from the front row, hands gripping the rail so tightly her knuckles turned white. She wasn't nervous now. She was overwhelmed. The man walking onto the field wasn't just her uncle anymore. He was something more. The kind of presence that didn't demand attention, but drew it anyway. Keanu crossed into the infield with a quiet step and moved toward the edge of the outfield grass. The assistant coach pointed him toward left field, signaling that they were letting him sub in for one inning as a show of good faith and maybe a bit of sportsmanship after what he'd just done. He nodded once and jogged gently out to position. No fanfare, no music, just a man in motion. Coach Daniels, watching from the opposite dugout, folded his arms. "Let's see how he handles a live play," he muttered. His assistant tried to offer a joke. "I mean, the guy just hit it over the wall." Daniels didn't laugh. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. But out in left field, Keanu stood still, eyes focused, glove ready. He bounced lightly on his toes, not trying to show off, just ready. The announcer's voice returned, trying to catch up to the moment. "Well, folks, in case you're just tuning in, that was indeed Keanu Reeves who sent that ball out of the park moments ago. And yes, he is now taking position in left field." A few cheers, a few more laughs, then silence again. The next batter stepped up to the plate. Keanu crouched slightly, focused. The first pitch was coming, and the world was about to watch again. The pitcher wound up and delivered a fastball straight down the middle. The batter made contact. It wasn't a hard hit, just a clean line drive slicing toward left field. It bounced once in the grass, fast and low, rolling toward Keanu. For a split second, the entire stadium leaned forward. No one breathed. Would he chase it? Could he field it? Keanu moved quickly, but not frantically. He tracked the ball with calm precision, his eyes never leaving it. With a quick sidestep and soft pivot, he reached out with the old glove just in time. Clean pickup, one step, two. He launched the ball back toward second with a sharp throw. Not wild, not overpowered, just clean. The infielder caught it without moving his feet. Out. The crowd gasped, then cheered. This time, it wasn't disbelief. It was admiration. In the dugout, Coach Daniels frowned. "Lucky Red," he muttered, but even he didn't sound convinced. On the other side of the diamond, Coach Valdez gave a quiet nod. His players clapped from the bench. One of them whispered, "Dude's got hands." Emma exhaled for the first time in what felt like minutes. She turned to the fan beside her, grinning. "That was real," she said. "He really just did that." The fan smiled back. "He's not just playing. He knows the game." Back on the field, Keanu adjusted his glove and stepped back into position. He didn't raise his fist, didn't wave to the crowd. He just stayed ready because he wasn't playing for applause. He was playing because it mattered. The next batter swung and missed. Then again, strike two. The stadium had begun to shift its energy, not louder, but more focused. People weren't watching for a viral moment anymore. They were watching because something felt honest about what was unfolding. The third pitch came low and fast. The batter connected, sending a high pop fly toward shallow center. Keanu sprinted forward without hesitation. His steps were smooth, balanced, controlled. The center fielder started toward it too, but then slowed, seeing Keanu's angle. He had it. As the ball began to fall, Keanu dropped slightly, glove angled up. A soft thud, caught cleanly. Cheers broke again, louder this time. Kids were jumping. Parents were clapping. Some of the crowd that had laughed earlier now rose to their feet. They weren't laughing anymore. The announcer chuckled, voice full of wonder. Well, if there were any doubts, I think they've been answered. Keanu stood, glove raised for a half second, then lowered it again and jogged lightly back to his spot. No theatrics, no smile, just focus and dignity. Emma leaned against the rail, whispering through her grin, "You're rewriting the whole story." And he was, not with words, but with every play. After the second out, the opposing team called a quick timeout. The batter stepped out of the box, adjusting his helmet and gloves, giving the crowd a breather. But the crowd didn't need one. They were too busy processing what they'd just seen. Keanu Reeves, who'd been mocked just an hour earlier for being just an actor, had now hit a home run and caught 2 clean plays in left field without flash, without ego, just control, respect, and purpose. The stadium camera once again cut to him, but this time there were no laughs, no sarcasm, only cheers and quiet nods. People were beginning to realize this wasn't a stunt. This was something else. In the dugout, a few players from both teams leaned over the railing, watching closely. One of the younger outfielders whispered to his teammate, "He plays like it means something." His teammate replied, "That's because it does." On the sideline, the announcer chuckled into the mic, his tone more reverent now. "All right, Mr. Reeves, let's see what you've got for one more." The batter stepped back in. The pitcher wound up. The next hit came hard, screaming down the left field line, just inches from going foul. Keanu took off, fast, faster than anyone expected. He tracked the ball as it curved toward the fence. The crowd stood as one, the moment stretching long, breathless. He dove, body extended, glove reaching, a thud. He hit the ground hard, sliding just shy of the foul line. Silence. Then the glove lifted, ball secured, out. The stadium exploded. Cheers, whistles, standing ovations. People who had never seen a film of his were now cheering his name, not because he was famous, but because in that moment he had done something real, something unfiltered. Emma's hands flew to her face. She turned to the older man beside her and shouted over the crowd, "Did you see that?" He nodded, grinning. He laid it all out, like he had nothing to lose. And maybe that's what made it matter. Keanu stood up slowly, brushing dirt from his arm. The players on both teams clapped for him. Even the catcher tipped his helmet. Back in the opposing dugout, Coach Daniels didn't speak. He just stared, arms folded, mouth tight, and for the first time all day, his smirk was gone. Keanu walked back to the dugout, passing his teammates with a slight nod. A few slapped his back. One handed him a bottle of water, but he didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He stepped over the chalk line, sat down, and placed his glove gently beside him. And in that quiet moment, no cameras, no spotlight, just breath and dust and stillness. It was clear. He hadn't entered the field to play a role. He'd come to play a truth. The inning turned over quickly. Team B's coach looked over at Keanu, gave a slight shrug and said quietly, "You're up again if you want it." Keanu didn't hesitate. He picked up the same old wooden bat, tapped it lightly on the ground, and stepped toward the on-deck circle. His legs moved smoothly, but the moment felt heavier now. Not because of pressure, but because eyes were everywhere. He passed the crowd near the third base line, and this time, people didn't whisper. They held their breath. Emma stood near the rail again, hands clasped, heart pounding. Back in the Team A dugout, Coach Daniels watched with folded arms. "Well, well," he said, raising his voice so it carried. "Let's see if lightning strikes twice." His players chuckled nervously, unsure whether to join him. As Keanu approached the batter's box, the stadium lights cast long shadows across the field. The sun had begun its descent, softening the heat but sharpening the drama. The pitcher on the mound now was a different one. A younger, cockier lefty, known for his speed. He smirked as he stared Keanu down. "Ready, Hollywood?" he called out. Keanu nodded once and took his position at the plate. He didn't bounce, didn't fidget, just stood still, focused. The first pitch came fast, too fast. A wild throw, meant more to intimidate than to challenge. Keanu swung but late. The ball cracked into the catcher's glove. Strike one. The stadium responded with a ripple of noise, some cheers, some mockery. But most of all, phones came up. Cameras zoomed in. Daniels clapped mockingly from the dugout. "That's more like it. Told you he's just acting." Laughter followed. Not cruel, but loud enough to cut. Emma flinched and looked away, her chest tightening. Keanu stepped back from the plate. He didn't look angry. He didn't even look frustrated. He just stood there for a moment, then adjusted his grip slightly. Stepped back in, eyes forward. No change in stance, no change in focus. The second pitch came even faster, low, and inside. Keanu swung again, missing by inches. Strike two. More laughter, more noise. The camera zoomed into Coach Daniels, who was doubled over in his seat, slapping his knee. I told you! That first one was a fluke." Emma shut her eyes. The cheers, the praise from earlier, the awe was unraveling. All from two missed swings. Keanu stood still, unmoved. He stepped back again. His bat hung loosely in his left hand. For a moment, everything went quiet. Not from awe, but from expectation. People were waiting to see what he would do. Would he give up? Would he walk away? Would he speak? But Keanu said nothing. He reached up and adjusted the collar of his shirt. Then he gripped the bat with both hands, let out one slow breath, and turned back toward the plate. His feet found their position. His body squared, and this time, something in his eyes shifted. Not anger, not defiance, but calm, like he had remembered something important, something old. From the dugout, Daniels was still laughing, his voice echoing across the field. "I knew it. Should have left him in the movies." The catcher leaned toward the pitcher behind his glove. "You want to strike him out for real? Or just keep playing?" The pitcher smirked. "One more. Then we end this." The third pitch was on its way. Keanu's grip tightened just a little. His elbows bent, his stance deepened. He didn't overthink. He didn't flinch. He just breathed. The ball flew. Fast. Too fast for most eyes to follow. But this time, Keanu didn't swing. He watched it all the way into the catcher's mitt. The umpire called it ball one. The crowd murmured. Some people gasped. He didn't swing, and it was the right call. Coach Daniels frowned, his amusement dimming just a little. Emma opened her eyes again, relief flickering across her face. Keanu stepped out, adjusted his stance, and stepped right back in. No theatrics, just presence. The fourth pitch came high and outside. Another ball. The count was now 2-2. The stadium grew quieter. This wasn't funny anymore. This wasn't staged. The pitcher took a breath, annoyed now. He wanted it over. He wanted the crowd back. He wound up, released. The ball came low and fast, aiming right for the strike zone. Keanu's eyes didn't blink. He shifted his weight, swung. The crack echoed like a drum line hitting the core of the field. The ball shot sharply toward the right baseline. A clean line drive, not a home run, but fast enough to slice between first and second. The crowd gasped. It was real. He'd made contact. The ball rolled into the outfield before the right fielder could grab it. Keanu dropped the bat and ran not with the grace of a professional, but with the drive of someone who didn't want to waste the moment. He reached first base easily. Safe. The crowd erupted into applause, louder than before. This time, no one was laughing. Emma's hands flew over her mouth. She looked around at the crowd, people now standing, some clapping, others simply watching in stunned silence. On the mound, the pitcher looked away. In the opposing dugout, Coach Daniels rubbed his face with his hand. He's not supposed to be able to do that, but he had, and he'd done it without saying a word. Keanu stood on first, his hands on his hips, breathing steadily. He nodded once to the first base coach, who nodded back with a quiet smile. From the stands, one of the kids who'd been chanting earlier shouted again, "Do it again!" The crowd laughed not at Keanu, but with joy, genuine joy. And slowly, something rare happened in a stadium like this. Respect took the place of spectacle. Curiosity turned into admiration. Mockery became memory. Because people weren't just watching a man play baseball. They were watching someone who had been doubted, dismissed, and laughed at show up anyway and deliver. Keanu turned toward Emma in the stands. She didn't say a word, but her eyes said everything. And his reply came just as quietly. He tapped his chest once, then pointed to the children. That's who it was for. Keanu stood on first base, motionless for a few seconds, bat already behind him, the crowd still cheering in waves. He didn't smile. He didn't acknowledge the noise. He just breathed. The first base coach said something, but Keanu didn't respond. His eyes were scanning the field, not looking for approval, just taking it all in. The colors, the movement, the air. Then, slowly, he stepped off the base and jogged back toward the dugout. The inning was over. His team had held the lead. No need for more. As he stepped back into the dugout, Emma met him near the railing. Her voice was low, tight with emotion. "You okay?" He nodded. She glanced at the crowd, then back at him. "They're starting to believe." Keanu didn't answer. He just looked down at the glove resting beside his seat. Then, after a moment, he picked it up, turned it slowly in his hands, ran his fingers over the stitching. The leather was cracked, but still strong, familiar. He closed his eyes, and the sound of the stadium faded. In its place came a whisper, not from around him, but from long ago. Mr. Rourke's voice. "You breathing?" Young Keanu, age 11, nodded on that uneven park field in Toronto. "All right then," Rourke said. "Let the bat be an extension of your breath. Don't chase the ball. Let it find you." Keanu had nodded again, but he hadn't understood it back then. Not fully, not until now. He opened his eyes slowly, the memory still floating behind them. Back on the field, the next inning was underway. The dugout murmured with low conversation. Players commented on the crowd, the plays, the buzz about Keanu trending online again. But he didn't hear them, not really. He stepped back out, back into the light. And this time, he didn't walk toward the field. He walked toward the on-deck circle again. Coach Valdez looked up, surprised. "You sure?" Keanu nodded. "Just one more." The coach didn't stop him, didn't question him. He just gave a small nod. And Keanu picked up the bat. This time, he held it differently. Not tight, not loose. Just right. He stepped into the box again. As the stadium adjusted to his presence, the camera cut to him instinctively, and the announcer's voice dropped lower, more serious now. "Mr. Reeves is back at the plate. Let's see what he's got." The pitcher shifted uncomfortably. The catcher squatted behind the plate, giving a quiet signal. Keanu lowered the bat, breathed in deeply through his nose, then out through his mouth. He closed his eyes. The stadium fell quiet again. Even the crowd noticed it. It wasn't silence they expected. It was something heavier. Stillness, as if something sacred were taking shape. Emma leaned forward again, watching closely. She wasn't nervous now. She was present, right there with him. And Keanu? He was somewhere in between, past and present, memory and moment. The catcher looked up, suddenly unsettled, because something in Keanu's presence had changed. Not his stance, not his face, but his energy. It wasn't performance anymore. It was poetry, and the field felt it. The pitcher looked to the catcher, then back at Keanu. He wound up slowly, trying to unsettle him with tempo. The ball left his hand fast, low, tailing inside. But Keanu didn't move, didn't flinch. He just breathed. Ball 1. The crowd murmured again. They felt it too. He wasn't reacting anymore. He was reading, feeling, moving differently. Emma narrowed her eyes. Something had clicked inside him. The second pitch came high and tight, buzzing past his chest. He stepped back, calm as ever. Ball 2. Coach Daniels stood at the edge of the opposing dugout, arms folded, saying nothing, but his fingers tapped nervously against his sleeve. The pitcher shook his head, annoyed now. He sat, wound up. Third pitch. Fastball. Center. Keanu swung. It was a smooth motion, like water over stone. The bat sliced through the air with a sound so clean it stopped the crowd. Mid-cheer. The ball shot up high and fast, rising past the shortstop's glove, soaring into left center. Not a home run, but a perfect hit. Enough for extra bases. Keanu dropped the bat gently and ran. First base, then second. The crowd roared again, but his face stayed steady, eyes forward, focused only on the run, not the reaction. He slid into second, just ahead of the tag. Safe. Dust rose around him as he stood. The second baseman patted his back, once not out of obligation, but out of respect. He had earned it. Keanu looked toward the dugout, breathing slowly. And for a moment, as he stood there, the wind brushed across the field. Soft, whispering, like it had traveled from another time, another place. Emma pressed a hand over her chest, her eyes glistening. She wasn't watching a performance anymore. She was watching someone become whole. Back on the mound, the pitcher adjusted his cap, now visibly rattled. He looked over to the dugout for guidance. Daniels didn't speak, didn't move. His jaw clenched. Keanu stepped off second base and crouched slightly, ready to run if the next batter made contact. But even as the game continued, the focus of the stadium stayed on him. The kids in the crowd weren't checking their phones now. They were watching every breath, every movement, because this wasn't just about baseball anymore. This was about watching someone who had every reason to leave, stay. Someone who had every excuse to respond with anger, choose peace. Someone who had been mocked and met it with mastery. The next batter struck out, but no one noticed. Keanu jogged back to the dugout, nodding to the catcher and pitcher as he passed. No words exchanged, just recognition. When he sat down again, he placed the glove beside him like before. Emma walked down toward the bench, eyes searching his. He looked up and smiled. For the first time that day, a real one. Quiet, grounded, Emma whispered. You centered everything. Keanu nodded, his voice barely louder than a breath. I've found the rhythm again. And in that still moment, it was clear. He hadn't just hit a ball. He had found himself. The stadium fell into a strange hush. Keanu was back at the plate. His feet found their familiar spot in the dirt. The old bat in his hands looked almost out of place compared to the slick gear around him. But it felt like home. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't glance at the pitcher. He simply exhaled and lifted the bat. In the stands, Emma stood with one hand gripping the rail and the other pressed over her heart. She couldn't explain the tension building in her chest, but she knew everyone did this moment meant something. On the mound, the opposing pitcher set his stance. He was one of the best closers on the team, brought in to finish games with speed and power. He had watched Keanu make contact earlier, and while he hadn't said anything out loud, his pride wouldn't let the same thing happen again. He wound up, then launched the first pitch, a brutal fastball, straight and low. Keanu didn't move. The ball hit the catcher's mitt with a sharp pop. Ball 1, the umpire called. A few fans cheered softly. The next pitch came faster, this time high and inside, meant to push Keanu off the plate. He stepped back slightly. Ball 2. Now the crowd was fully quiet, all eyes on him. He adjusted his grip, dug his heels into the dirt, and nodded once. Then came the third pitch. The pitcher threw with everything he had, the ball slicing across the plate like a blade. It came with heat, with intent, with speed that dared Keanu to meet it. And he did. His swing wasn't rushed. It wasn't aggressive. It was smooth, balanced, crack. The sound split the stadium in half. It was sharp, deep, unmistakable. The kind of sound that didn't just mark a hit. It marked a moment. The ball rose, slicing up into the sky like it had been waiting to be released all day. It sailed past the infield, over the heads of the outfielders, and kept climbing. The crowd gasped. All of them, tens of thousands, leaned forward as one. The ball soared toward the far wall in left center. The outfielders didn't even run. They just turned, tilted their heads, and watched it disappear over the fence. Gone. Silence fell, for one long breath. And then, the explosion. The crowd erupted into a roar so loud it shook the metal railings. People jumped to their feet, shouting, screaming, hands flying into the air. Children cried out his name. Grown men clapped with their eyes wide, their voices breaking. Emma didn't move at first. She just stared at the field, mouth open, tears already forming in her eyes. Keanu lowered the bat, not tossing it, not raising it. He simply bent down and placed it gently on the ground. Then he began his run. No theatrics, no fist pumps, just grace. Each base was a quiet step in something much bigger than baseball, and the crowd couldn't stop watching. As Keanu rounded first base, a gentle breeze swept across the field. His loose shirt moved with the wind, catching the sunlight just right. There was no urgency in his steps, only presence. A man not performing, not proving, but simply being, living. And somehow, that made the moment even more powerful. By the time he reached second base, half the stadium was still frozen in awe, while the other half was in a frenzy. Phones rose into the air, capturing videos that would circulate for days. Headlines would come, debates would follow. But right now, none of that mattered. Emma finally found her voice. She shouted his name. It cracked through her tears, but it was pure. The kind of sound that came from remembering the boy in the sandlot. The one who stayed late to sweep chalk lines for the next day's game. The one who believed baseball wasn't about winning. It was about moments like this. Coach Daniels, who had been roaring earlier, now stood slack-jawed. His sunglasses had slid slightly down his nose, revealing eyes that were wide with disbelief. His mouth opened, then closed again. No words came out. "Did that just happen?" someone near him whispered. Keanu touched third base. The entire dugout had emptied. Kids, coaches, volunteers. Everyone stood in a line near home plate, unsure whether to run out to him or stay back and watch the final stride. Their faces were lit with something rare: respect, joy, wonder. And just before he reached home, Keanu looked up. Only once, his eyes scanned the stadium, not for applause, not for cameras, but for one face. He found it. Emma. Their eyes locked. Tears streaked her cheeks. She nodded slowly, and Keanu smiled. It was small, almost invisible, but real. Then his foot touched home plate. The stadium cracked open again. People leapt from their seats. Hats were thrown in the air. Popcorn buckets overturned. Little boys pointed at the scoreboard while their parents lifted them up onto their shoulders. The announcer's voice finally came through the speakers, struggling to be heard. "Ladies and gentlemen, that was out of the park." A pause. And I mean literally. Keanu didn't bow. He didn't raise his arms. He turned toward the dugout and walked. Kids surrounded him halfway, throwing arms around him, clapping his back, lifting his arms in celebration, even if he didn't lift them himself. He accepted it all with quiet humility. Emma wiped her face and laughed through her sobs. Then she whispered to herself, "You did it. You really did it." Somewhere near the back of the field, a boy who had once been bullied for loving Keanu's movies shouted, "He's the real deal! I told you all!" And just like that, something had shifted. Not just the game, not just the scoreboard, the hearts of everyone there. Keanu Reeves hadn't just hit a home run. He had restored something in the stadium that day. Something no one knew they'd been missing. Coach Daniels' laugh was sharp and hollow. It echoed across the stadium like a can rattling down an empty alley. "Beginner's luck," he shouted, waving his hands in exaggerated amusement. His voice cracked just slightly, but no one around him seemed to be laughing anymore. One of his assistant coaches gave him a forced smile, but quickly turned back to the field. The crowd was still on its feet, not dispersing after the home run, but instead swelling in energy. A chant was beginning to roll like a low tide gathering speed. Keanu! Keanu! Daniel squinted toward the jumbotron as it replayed the moment. The slow-motion feed zoomed in on the crack of the bat, the impossible angle of Keanu's swing, the perfect arc of the ball lifting into the sky and vanishing beyond the fence. The stadium sound system captured the thump of the ball landing on a distant metal seat. Then it showed Keanu's face, calm, collected, like a man returning home after a long walk. The chant got louder. Emma pressed her hands over her mouth, eyes filled with disbelief and joy. Children near her waved handmade signs and foam fingers, bouncing in their seats like it was the World Series. Coach Daniels forced another laugh, though his smile had become a twitch. "One swing doesn't make a player," he muttered to no one in particular. But his voice had no weight now. It floated in the air and disappeared into the crowd's roar. In the dugout, Keanu sat quietly, wiping dust off his glove. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't even smiling. His face held the kind of peace that didn't come from victory, but from something more internal, something older. A childhood voice echoing back across decades. A dusty field in Canada. A man named Mr. Rourke who had once knelt beside him and said, "You don't need to be the best. You just need to feel alive in the game." Daniels turned back to his players, expecting chuckles or at least shared mockery. Instead, he was met with silence. Ryan, his star shortstop, was fidgeting with his cap and staring at the field. "Loosen up," Daniels said, nudging him. "Don't let some actor get in your head." Ryan looked up. "Coach, did you see the follow-through on that swing? That wasn't luck." Daniels narrowed his eyes. "Are you doubting the game? Doubting what we've trained for?" "It's not that," another player chimed in. "It's just, that was clean. Like, real clean. I've never seen a swing that balanced from someone outside the league." Daniels opened his mouth, but found no words. His authority was slipping, not with defiance, but with quiet erosion respect being quietly redirected like water around a stone. The inning change came swiftly. Coach Daniels gestured half-heartedly for his outfield rotation. Keanu stood up, still calm, and jogged toward left field, taking a position that wasn't his but felt oddly familiar. The crowd cheered again, this time louder, steadier, not a burst but a wave. The opposing team's batter stepped up, first swing-high pop fly into left. All eyes snapped to Keanu. He ran a short arc under the ball, glove steady. Not flashy, not rushed. His posture was grounded, like a man who had chased fly balls his whole life. And then, thud. Glove closed. Crowd silence. Then, eruption. Keanu took a few casual steps before tossing the ball back to the infield. No fist pump, no showmanship, just ease, as if he'd been doing it for years. The stadium's energy didn't die down. If anything, it built in ripples. The chant started again, but this time, it wasn't just from one section. It was the entire stadium now. Keanu. Keanu. Camera crews turned away from the dugout and locked onto Keanu in the outfield. A soft zoom captured his steady breathing, his upright stance, the subtle lift of his chin, as if he was finally standing in a place that had been waiting for him all along. In the stands, Daniels' assistant leaned toward him. They're not just cheering because it was a good play. Daniels didn't answer. He was staring at Keanu, but not really seeing him. Something in his expression had changed. His arrogance was fading, replaced by confusion, then by something far more vulnerable: insecurity. Daniels had spent years teaching kids discipline, motion, technique. He lived for precision, but he also lived for control. And now, the spotlight had shifted. It wasn't on his team. It wasn't even on the game. It was on a man he had called a joke. And the crowd wasn't laughing. Back in the dugout, Ryan removed his cap and fanned himself. "You know," he muttered, "I think I saw Keanu Reeves in a samurai film once. He moved like that then too." One of the younger players nodded. "That wasn't acting." Emma sat quietly near the team bench, her heart pounding. She looked across the field to where Keanu stood, still calm, unaware of how much had changed in just a few minutes. Or maybe he knew. Maybe that was the most impressive thing he knew, and still didn't let it touch his ego. Coach Daniels tried to speak again, but his voice didn't carry. No one was listening. Not to him. Not right now. The next play came quickly. A grounded ball sped toward the gap between shortstop and third. Keanu sprinted in from left field, a longer run than most would attempt, but he didn't hesitate. He cut across the grass with surprising agility, scooped the ball cleanly on the bounce, and launched it to second with a crisp, confident throw. Out. The stadium erupted again. Coach Daniels lowered his cap slightly, shading his eyes. But it didn't matter. The scoreboard, the crowd, the cameras, everything was tilted now, and the weight of it settled on his shoulders. He looked up one last time at the Jumbotron. Another slow-motion replay. Keanu mid-run, eyes locked in, arms coordinated, form immaculate. A whisper passed through the seats behind him. "Who trained him?" someone asked. Daniels clenched his jaw. He knew the answer didn't matter anymore. Keanu Reeves had arrived not as a guest, not as a joke, but as a player. And for the first time in a long while, Daniels had nothing clever left to say. Keanu stepped back up to the plate, the bat resting on his shoulder, with a quiet familiarity that hadn't been there earlier. The crowd buzzed with a different energy, now less surprise, more anticipation. Everyone wanted to see if what had happened earlier was a fluke, or the start of something real. The pitcher, a seasoned left-hander known for his control, squinted toward home plate. He wasn't going to underestimate Keanu again. He nodded at the catcher, wound up, and delivered a fastball low and outside. Keanu didn't swing. He watched it zip by and land neatly in the catcher's mitt. "Ball one," the umpire called. Keanu adjusted his grip and dug in a little deeper. His stance was more confident now, but still humble. The way he positioned himself, relaxed yet focused, sent a message. He wasn't chasing glory. He was just in it, present, alive in the moment. The second pitch came a cutter aiming high inside. Keanu turned slightly, letting the ball brush past his chest. Ball two. Coach Daniels folded his arms tighter across his chest. His jaw worked in silence. Next to him, Ryan watched intently. It was like watching a man slowly being rewritten before their eyes. The third pitch came fast and straight. Keanu swung. The crack of the bat wasn't as explosive as before, but clean, crisp. The ball shot between first and second, skipping just out of reach of the diving infielder. It rolled smoothly into right field. The stadium erupted again. Keanu took first base with ease. He didn't pump his fist or gesture to the crowd. He simply stood tall, nodding once to the first baseman, who gave a slow nod back. That one moment said more than 100 cheers. In the dugout, Emma stood on her toes trying to see over the players. Her eyes sparkled, hands clutched to her chest. She didn't even notice she was smiling. Back in the outfield, Coach Daniels leaned forward slightly. His eyes narrowed. He hadn't expected Keanu to pull it off twice. But now it was undeniable. The man wasn't coasting on one miracle. He was playing baseball. By the time the next batter was up, Keanu had already taken a modest lead off first. When the pitcher turned his attention elsewhere, Keanu stole second without a throw. The audience gasped in delight. He stood on second, breathing slowly, looking toward the batter's box like he'd been there his whole life, as if he belonged. The inning changed, and Keanu took his position back in left field. A few of the younger players exchanged quiet words behind gloved mouths. One nodded toward Keanu. "I think we misjudged him," he said. "Yeah," the other replied. "Big time." The next batter lifted a high fly ball toward left. Keanu tracked it with ease, his body moving in harmony with the arc. At the last moment, just as it seemed the ball might carry too far, he extended his glove, snagged, he pivoted, and fired to second. A runner had tagged up from first and was now caught mid-path. The ball reached the second baseman in perfect rhythm. Out. 2 plays. No drama. Just smooth execution. Coach Daniels didn't speak. His players didn't look at him. Instead, eyes followed Keanu as he trotted off the field, his face calm, the corners of his mouth hinting at something between peace and gratitude. In the bottom of the 6th, Keanu returned to the batter's box for his 3rd at-bat of the night. By now, the crowd didn't cheer out of surprise, they cheered because they believed. They leaned forward in their seats, phones recording, voices rising with every step he took toward home plate. This pitcher was different, a right-hander with a wicked curveball and a chip on his shoulder. You could see it in the way he glared toward Keanu, eyes narrowed, lip curled slightly. He didn't like what was happening, didn't like being shown up by an outsider, a celebrity. First pitch curveball low and inside. Keanu didn't flinch, didn't move. Ball 1. Second pitch fastball down the middle, the kind that tempts even the most disciplined batter. Keanu stayed calm. He waited. Then came the 3rd pitch, a slider. Keanu stepped into it and sent a hard grounder bouncing through the infield. The shortstop snagged it, but by the time he spun and threw, Keanu was already sprinting past first base with surprising speed. The throw wasn't in time. Another hit, 2 for 3 on the day. The announcers up in the booth started murmuring. Some joked about Keanu signing a minor league contract. Others called it one of the most heartwarming performances they'd seen in a charity game. But what mattered was what was happening on the field. One of the pro players, tall and broad-shouldered with a sleeve of tattoos, jogged over from third base and extended a fist. "Didn't expect that," he said, grinning. Keanu bumped fists with him, chuckling under his breath. "Neither did I." The respect was no longer silent. It was visible, open. And it wasn't just for the plays, though they were impressive. It was for how he carried himself. No celebration, no gloating, just humility and quiet confidence. The next inning, on defense again, Keanu was tested with a deep fly ball near the fence. He chased it down, eyes on the ball the entire time, feet pounding the warning track. At the last second, he leapt barely and caught it midair, his body brushing the padded wall. The crowd gasped, then erupted. Even Coach Daniels blinked in disbelief. When Keanu returned to the dugout, some of the players clapped him on the back, others simply smiled, heads nodding. That kind of approval, unspoken but deeply earned, meant more than any trophy. Emma watched from the sidelines, tears starting to brim in her eyes. Not because he was good at baseball, not because of the attention, but because for the first time in a long time, he looked completely at peace. He looked like the version of himself that had been missing for years. After the inning ended, Keanu stood quietly behind the dugout fence, watching the sky begin to turn golden with the setting Sunday. The field lights flickered on. The sounds of popcorn bags crinkling and soda fizzing filled the air, blending with cheers and announcer chatter. A young boy walked up to him shyly, clutching a ball. "Mr. Reeves," the boy said, voice small, "can you sign this?" Keanu smiled and knelt to eye level. Of course. He took the pen, scribbled his name, and handed it back with both hands. "Thanks," the boy said, his eyes wide. "You're really good." Keanu smiled. "Just trying my best." And that was the truth. There was no stopping now. Not because he had something to prove, but because something inside him had finally been unlocked. A joy he thought was long gone. A connection not to fame, but to the present moment, to the people around him. Baseball was just the backdrop. What mattered was the way it brought everyone together. The sound of the crowd had changed. It wasn't just loud anymore. It was joyful, unified. Somewhere between admiration and disbelief, a new kind of energy had taken over the stadium. The kids in the stands, especially the ones seated in the left field bleachers, had begun a chant that grew with every passing second. K-A-A, new, K-A-A, new. Their voices, high-pitched and honest, pierced through the crackle of the stadium speakers. What started with 10 voices became 50, then 100. Soon, the entire section was echoing with the name they'd only known from movie screens. But now, they were seeing something else. A man who didn't play to win, but played to inspire. Parents looked at one another with raised brows and impressed grins. It wasn't every day that a Hollywood icon came to a charity game and stunned the entire city with both humility and skill. One father nudged his son gently and said, "Did you know he used to play in Canada, back before he was famous?" The boy's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Yep, heard he played a lot of ice hockey too. But baseball? That's something else." A couple sitting 2 rows down turned their attention to a small camera crew now interviewing fans near the dugout. The woman being interviewed, a nurse named Lauren, who had been a lifelong Dodgers fan, smiled into the mic. "He's humble. That's rare these days. I came here for the players, but I'm staying for Keanu." Another man, holding a handmade sign that read "We believe in you," told the crew, "My son's been bullied at school for being too slow in sports. But watching Keanu step up here, take those hits, keep going, it's powerful. We need more role models like that." The camera zoomed in on kids in every corner of the stadium, some standing on tiptoes just to see better. Others sitting on their parents' shoulders with their mouths open in awe. And miles away, in a small living room in Phoenix, Arizona, a young boy named Tyler sat cross-legged on the floor, watching the live stream on his mom's laptop. Tyler was 8. He'd been told by his gym teacher earlier that week that maybe sports weren't his thing. He was smaller than the other boys, a little clumsy. He rarely caught the ball and had never hit a home run. But now, eyes wide, he watched as Keanu Reeves calmly stepped back onto the field and nodded politely to the opposing team. Not cocky, not showy, just real. Tyler whispered to no one in particular, "Maybe I can try too." Back at the stadium, Emma stood near the dugout, hands clutched in front of her chest. Her heart was full, and her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. She wasn't sure if it was the chants, the way the crowd had turned, or the fact that Coach Daniels was now completely silent with his arms crossed and jaw locked. Maybe it was all of it. She turned her eyes up to the sky for just a second, and with a soft breath that only the wind could hear, she whispered, "Thank you. Thank you for this moment, for this man, for this reminder that grace under pressure is still possible in this world." In the press box above home plate, broadcasters scrambled to adjust their tone. What began as casual banter about celebrity appearances had transformed into something entirely different. One announcer leaned forward, tapping the mic as the camera zoomed in on Keanu in the outfield. "We're watching something special here today," he said. "It's not just about baseball anymore. This crowd, this moment, it's bigger than the game." And it was. Every time Keanu fielded the ball or smiled at a child asking for an autograph between innings, something shifted. It was as if the air had grown lighter, more hopeful. No longer was he the underdog actor mocked before the first pitch. He had become a symbol of perseverance, of quiet dignity under fire, and the crowd felt it. Even Coach Daniels, who had kept his sunglasses on all afternoon, couldn't hide the way his posture changed. What was once smugness had turned into stunned stillness. His players, who had laughed earlier at Keanu's presence, now clapped when he made a play. A few even nodded in approval, no longer seeing him as an intruder but as someone who had earned his place. Emma's phone buzzed with messages from volunteers, parents, and reporters asking for interviews. They wanted to know how she had pulled this off, how she had gotten Keanu to play. But all she could do was smile, quietly. She hadn't pulled anything off. He had shown up because he cared. In the upper deck, an elderly man in a faded Dodgers cap turned to the woman next to him. That's a man who plays for something more than applause. Down in the concession lines, children tugged at their parents' sleeves, asking for baseball gloves and hats. Some of them wanted to play catch that evening. Others just wanted to pretend for a little while that they could be like him. A girl with a bandaged leg and crutches sat beside her mother, a rainbow ice pop melting in her hand. She watched the field, eyes locked on Keanu. Then softly, barely audible, she said, He looks like he believes in us." In the dugout, as the inning changed, Keanu took a sip of water and wiped his forehead. A young player sitting beside him extended his hand. "Thanks for showing up," the player said, sincere and quiet. Keanu nodded once. "Thanks for letting me try." The player smiled. "You didn't just try, you changed everything." Above them, the chant began again, louder this time. No longer just kids. Keanu, Keanu, Keanu. 1,000 voices rose in unison, not for a movie star, not for a celebrity moment, but for a man who had walked into doubt and left a mark on every heart in the stadium. Coach Daniels stood just past the pitcher's mound, shifting on his feet. The crowd hadn't dispersed. Reporters hovered like bees, their cameras already rolling. The scoreboard still flashed the final score, but that wasn't what anyone was focused on. All eyes were on the unlikely man who had walked onto the field in humility and walked off it in triumph. Keanu was wiping dust from his glove, standing near the dugout when he noticed Daniels walking toward him. The air grew quiet again. Not silent, just still. It was the kind of hush that felt heavy, as if everyone sensed something important was about to happen. Daniels stopped a few feet away from Keanu. His face twitched, unsure of how to begin. The man who had laughed loudest earlier now looked like someone facing a mirror he hadn't expected to see. Reporters jostled for a better angle. Daniels cleared his throat. "I owe you something," he said, his voice loud enough to carry over the quiet hum of the crowd. "Actually, I owe everyone something." Keanu said nothing. His face remained calm, composed, welcoming. He wasn't here for revenge. He had already said what he needed to say through his actions. "I made a mistake today," Daniels continued, voice slightly cracking. "I forgot that sportsmanship begins with respect, and I let my own ego blind me to the spirit of what this game is about." There was a ripple through the stands. Emma, standing with her hands pressed to her mouth, couldn't stop her eyes from tearing up. Daniels took another step forward and held out his hand. Not just toward Keanu, but toward everything he had mocked earlier. The bat, the swing, the man. "I judged you based on who I thought you were. I thought you came here to pretend. But you didn't. You came here with heart. And you played better than most of my guys today." Keanu looked down at the extended hand for a moment. There was no hesitation in his heart, only a gentle awareness that this moment wasn't about winning or losing. It was about something deeper: redemption, dignity, and the power of grace. He reached forward and clasped Daniel's hand in both of his. A strong shake, firm and human. The kind of gesture that didn't need a press release to make its impact. "We all have something to offer," Keanu said, his voice calm, almost gentle. "Sometimes it just takes the right moment to see it." The crowd didn't erupt this time. Not with chaos or wild cheers, but with something more profound. Applause. Slow at first, then stronger. Respectful, measured. From the kids in the stands who had chanted his name to the veterans in the press booth who had seen thousands of games. Everyone knew they had witnessed something special. Daniels nodded, then turned and gestured toward his team. Several of his players had already begun walking over. A young pitcher stepped up first. "That homer?" the player said to Keanu, grinning wide. "I'm still not over it." Keanu chuckled. "Neither am I." The team began to surround Keanu, no longer with curious glances or skeptical looks, but with admiration. A few players who hadn't spoken all day now smiled, nodding as they approached. One of the outfielders patted Keanu on the shoulder. "I've never seen anyone walk into this kind of game with that much pressure," he said. "You made it look easy." Keanu laughed gently. It didn't feel easy. The crowd continued clapping, but now it wasn't just for Keanu. It was for the transformation they'd witnessed in everyone on the field. The coach, the players, even the audience had changed. The jeers and smirks from earlier in the day were long gone. What remained was something more meaningful: unity. Emma stood quietly near the sidelines. She hadn't taken her eyes off Keanu. Not once. Her heart was full, not just because he had played well, but because he had turned humiliation into healing. For her, for everyone watching. She wiped a tear from her cheek as Keanu turned, caught her gaze, and smiled. One of the reporters broke the moment with a shouted question. "Keanu, did you expect today to go like this?" Keanu looked around at the crowd, the players, the coach still standing nearby. He gave a small shrug. "I came to play for fun. I stayed because something beautiful happened." Daniels chuckled quietly. "Yeah, it did." A younger player stepped forward, glancing between Daniels and Keanu. "Mind if we grab a picture?" he asked, holding out his phone. Without hesitation, Keanu nodded. The players gathered around. Daniels stood on one side, Keanu on the other. As the shutter clicked, the scoreboard behind them still lit up with the final score, but no one was looking at it. They were looking at the people in the picture, at the transformation, at the respect earned, not demanded, at the moment when humility silenced arrogance and character outshone skill. After the photo, a small boy approached from the crowd barrier. He held a baseball in both hands, nervously looking up at Keanu. "Can you sign it?" he asked softly. Keanu took the ball gently, crouched to the boy's level, and signed it, then handed it back with a smile. "Keep playing," he said. "You never know what you're capable of." As the boy ran back to his parents, Daniels turned to Keanu once more. "I meant what I said. You played better than most of my guys." Keanu gave a small bow of his head. "Thank you. But today wasn't about being better. It was about reminding people why we love this game." The applause swelled once more. From a playful dare to a public apology, the game had become something else entirely. A moment of truth, a reminder that dignity doesn't have to shout to be heard, that kindness can change hearts, and that even on a baseball field filled with professionals, there's still room for grace to take the lead. The field was clearing, but the energy in the air had changed. It was no longer about the game. It was about the impact. Keanu walked quietly over to the charity booth set up behind the third base dugout. It was a small table lined with signed jerseys, raffle items, and a banner that read, "Play for all, bringing sports to every child." Volunteers were busy organizing donations and handing out flyers to the lingering fans. In Keanu's hand was the bat, the one that had cracked against the ball and sent it flying into the outfield during the most unexpected home run of the afternoon. The moment had already become legend inside the stadium. People were still replaying it on their phones, reliving the swing, the sound, the silence before the crowd erupted. Keanu looked down at the bat. It was just wood. Smooth, balanced, worn a bit from the impact. Then, he handed it over to the stunned volunteer standing behind the booth. "Put this up for auction," he said gently. "Let it fund equipment for the kids." The woman blinked at him, speechless for a second, then nodded slowly. "Mr. Reeves, are you sure? This is probably going to be worth." "I'm sure," Keanu said. "It belongs to something bigger now." He turned away before she could say more. The crowd had seen it happen. Many began to applaud again, some cheering his name, not because he hit a home run, but because of what he just did with it. He made his way to the edge of the field where a group of children were gathered, clutching little gloves and foam fingers, eyes wide with excitement. They had been watching him all afternoon. They didn't care about stats or professional rosters. To them, Keanu Reeves had just become the most inspiring person they'd ever seen. He knelt down beside them. "Want to learn how to swing like that?" he asked. A chorus of tiny yeses exploded. One little boy giggled, nearly dropping his glove as he ran closer. Keanu picked up a nearby plastic bat and gently guided the boy's grip. "Hold it like this. Loose hands, okay? You don't have to strangle the bat. Just breathe." He showed them how to square their stance, how to keep their eye on the ball. The kids listened like it was sacred advice. Then one little girl, no older than 7, raised her hand. "Mr. Keanu," she asked timidly, "were you scared when that coach was mean to you?" The question came like a ripple through the moment. Keanu looked at her, surprised, but only for a second. Then he smiled. "Yes," he said honestly. "I was scared. I didn't want to embarrass myself, or Emma, or anyone. He paused. But I've learned something. Fear isn't the end. It's not the thing that stops you. It's the thing that tells you something important is about to happen. Fear is the beginning of something better. The kids stared at him, hanging on every word. The children didn't say anything at first. They just looked at him, their eyes wide, as if something inside them had shifted. Even the volunteers nearby had gone quiet, listening to that simple truth echo in the evening air. A little girl in a wheelchair, wearing a cap 3 sizes too big, rolled forward slowly. She looked up at Keanu and whispered, "My big brother says I can't play sports." Keanu turned to her gently. "What's your name?" "Lila." "Well, Lila," he said, kneeling so his eyes were level with hers, "your brother doesn't get to decide what you can or can't do. You do. And if you want to play, I'll help you figure it out." She beamed so brightly, it almost made Emma cry from where she stood nearby, watching the whole thing unfold. Keanu stood again and continued helping the children with their swings. Each time one of them missed the ball, he encouraged them, "Try again. You're getting closer." And when they connected, he clapped louder than anyone. Behind them, parents were recording. Some were tearing up, others just smiling. One man leaned over to his wife and said, "I brought our kid to see baseball stars, but I think we just saw something more important." A few minutes later, a player from the opposing team approached quietly. He was tall, early 30s, with a strong arm and a patchy beard. He tapped Keanu on the shoulder and handed him a signed baseball. "That was something else, man," the player said. "Didn't expect to come to a game and get schooled by John Wick." Keanu laughed, shaking his head. "I didn't expect to do any of this today," he replied. "You've got a good swing," the player said, "but an even better heart." Keanu took the ball and nodded, holding it like something sacred. Then he handed it to Lila. "Here," he said, "this is for you, from both of us." She cradled it like a treasure. By now, most of the stadium seats were emptying, but people weren't rushing to leave. They lingered, watching, taking it all in. No one wanted the moment to end. Emma finally stepped forward, wiping her eyes, and smiling so wide, it softened every line on her face. "You always surprise me," she said. "I surprise myself," Keanu admitted. She glanced toward the bat at the charity booth, already displayed behind a glass case with a sign, "Donated by Keanu Reeves. Let the next generation play." "That was a generous gift," she said. Keanu shrugged. "It's just wood. But maybe it becomes more than that now." They stood side by side as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the field. The scoreboard still blinked the final result, but no one cared about the numbers anymore. What stayed in the air was something different. It was a story, a lesson, a reminder that anyone can be underestimated, but everyone deserves a chance to rise. The last fans trickled out, but the laughter of the children still echoed. One little boy turned to his mom and whispered, "I want to be like him when I grow up." The mom looked down. "Like who?" He pointed to the man kneeling on the grass, helping a girl in a wheelchair grip a bat. Him. The morning after the charity game, the stadium sat empty. The roaring crowds were gone. No vendors. No players. Just the soft hush of wind moving through the stands and the golden hue of early morning light stretching across the field. Keanu Reeves sat quietly in the middle row of the third base side. He wore a simple gray hoodie, jeans, and worn sneakers. No cameras, no interviews, no fanfare. Just him, staring out over the field, like it still held echoes of everything that had happened the day before. The dugouts were quiet now. The scoreboard was dark, but the memories were still fresh. He leaned forward slightly, resting his arms on his knees, and let out a slow breath. There was something sacred about the silence, about the way the rising sun caught the dust still lingering in the air, making it shimmer like the moment wasn't quite ready to let go. Keanu rubbed his hands together for warmth, then folded them. He glanced to his right, as if expecting someone to be there. But it was just a seat, just one of thousands. And yet, his eyes softened, because in his heart, he saw someone. "Thank you, Mr. Rourke," he whispered. He hadn't said the name out loud in years, but this time it felt like it needed to be spoken. Not for the world, but for himself. Mr. Rourke, the old baseball coach from when Keanu was 12, the one who taught him how to grip a bat, the one who said, "You've got more power than you think, not just in your swing, in here," and tapped Keanu's chest. He was the first person outside of Keanu's family who believed in him. And when Keanu struck out in a big game and sat crying behind the bleachers, it was Mr. Rourke who said, "Don't let one moment write your whole story." That line had stuck with Keanu through every failure, every rejection, every moment when the world tried to tell him what he wasn't. Don't let one moment write your whole story. It echoed again now in the silence of the morning as he looked over the field where 1,000 strangers had chanted his name just the day before. Not because he was famous, but because he had reminded them of something they'd forgotten. Hope, possibility, that quiet courage lives in everyone. Keanu leaned back in his seat, eyes following a bird that flew over the diamond. He smiled. It was the kind of smile that had nothing to do with happiness and everything to do with peace. Because for once, he didn't feel like he had anything to prove. Not to himself, not to anyone. He had done something good, and it was enough. They say the world notices noise, the loudest voice, the biggest performance, the flashiest wins. But sometimes, the quietest act speaks the loudest. Like handing a bat to a kid who thinks they'll never swing one, or donating something simple so others can dream bigger, or sitting alone in a stadium after it's all over, whispering a thank you to someone long gone but never forgotten. That's the kind of noise that matters. Keanu stood slowly and made his way down toward the field. Every step echoed in the emptiness. When he reached the edge of the diamond, he stopped and looked out over the bases. His footsteps had long been erased, but the moment still lived here. He picked up a small piece of paper that had blown against the fence. It was a flyer for the charity auction. On it, a smiling child held a glove too big for his hand, standing next to a caption that read, "Every kid deserves a shot." Keanu held the flyer for a moment, then tucked it into his back pocket. That's why he did it. That's why he stepped onto that field. Not to prove himself, but to remind people, especially kids, that you don't have to be loud to be worthy. You don't have to be the best to be remembered. Sometimes, all you have to do is show up, try your best, and stay kind. The lessons from that day would live far beyond the game. They would travel home with the children who watched from the stands, who whispered to their parents on the drive home, "Maybe I can do something great, too." They would linger in the minds of adults who once chased their own dreams, but forgot how to believe. They would echo in the quiet moments of people like Emma, who had once doubted if she belonged in rooms like these, only to be reminded that grace often walks in without applause. And they would remain here, in this stadium, carried on the wind, passed down like stories between generations of players who might one day hear about the movie star who hit a home run, but more importantly, who gave it away for something bigger than himself. Keanu stepped onto the field one last time. He walked to the pitcher's mound and stood in the center. Not to throw, not to perform, just to stand where so many had stood before him. And then, he closed his eyes and whispered once more, "Thank you." The sky was beginning to shift from soft gold to bright blue. The day was beginning, but Keanu knew this chapter was ending. He turned and walked toward the dugout. As he exited the field, the scoreboard flickered on. Just for a second, a technician testing something inside hadn't realized the timing, but up it came. Final score: Hope 1, Doubt 0. Keanu smiled at the timing. Then he disappeared down the tunnel, leaving behind no trace but the feeling that something meaningful had just happened. So here's the truth. Never underestimate a patient heart. Everyone has a silent talent waiting to be awakened. A voice that's been waiting for the right moment. A dream that's been sitting quietly, hoping to be believed in again. Maybe it's not about the spotlight. Maybe it's about the courage to step onto the field, even when no one's watching. And maybe, just maybe, your moment is coming. If you believe in second chances, if you've ever been underestimated, if you've waited for your moment to shine, leave a comment below. Tell us what talent you carry quietly. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories, because sometimes the quietest stories are the ones that change everything.